Welcome to episode 93 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy features conversations with Canadian theatre makers from actor to director to playwright and more. My guest this week is playwright Micheal Ross Albert. His play, Miss, opens September 14th at the Assembly Theatre in Toronto, presented by Unit 102 Actors Company in association with the Spadina Avenue Gang. If you want to drop me a line, I would love to hear from you. You can find Stageworthy on Facebook and Twitter at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com.
Performer or a theater creator, especially if they're indie, almost never gets interviewed.
Yeah, I've lived in a couple other cities, and one of them was New York.
Yeah,
and I feel like I went to public talks a lot with actors or other theater makers, and we don't do so much of that.
No,
maybe we don't listen. We like talking a lot, like we go to. We go to forums, maybe I'm eating my words there.
No, but I mean, one of the things that I think New York has, and I mean, it's hard to say because I'm not in it. My perception is that New York has more of a theater community, and Toronto has a few different communities that consider themselves the theater community.
Yeah,
and they don't connect. There's no place to connect. Really?
Yeah, that's... It can definitely be tough.
Yeah.
I'm like, not to say that the community in New York isn't separate or contingent on like the size of the venue that you're used to performing in. But maybe it's that there's a larger like theater going community.
Yes.
You talk to audiences that will go to shows regardless if it's uptown, if it's downtown, that like they are hungry for this kind of for the type of work that they know speaks to them.
Right.
And they actively seek it out. And I don't know if it's because apartments are so small, you're always looking for something to do outside of your comfort, outside of your home. And so there's this really, just normalized culture of going to the theater, which we don't really have here.
No,
and don't. Then people that do go to theater are, you can kind of pigeonhole them into certain categories, like a tarragon audience, which we hear that categorization a lot. Like, well, it's not for the tarragon audience. Like they're not going to see a show at the Storefront necessarily. No. So there is a bit of a dichotomy, or a divide there.
Yeah, it's funny because I worked at I worked as an usher for the Edinburgh Theatre.
Oh yeah,
and that's a particular audience.
Certainly,
I mean, depending on the show. I mean, there are people who go see shows at a Mirvish house that will never go see an indie show because they just don't. It doesn't interest them. It's not big. It's not like, and sometimes they haven't even heard of it. They don't know where to look for it.
Right, and the seats are uncomfortable.
There is that. There is that, and but you see like, and I mean, I think that a lot of the theaters that they're relying on subscriptions do see their audience. They're sort of looking at the future going, okay, this audience is disappearing.
Yeah, but there are great, like mid-sized houses that are making being a subscriber easier.
Yeah.
Like I subscribe to The Factory. I have for the last 2 seasons, just because it's an affordable subscription.
Yeah.
It's got flexible dates. It's art that I know I'm going to support anyway, and it's available to my demographic just because it's not as cost prohibitive.
Right.
So I think that I think that those, well, and Tarragon too, even, like, they have the, like, an arts worker under 35 subscription, which can, you know, depending on what your level of financial security is, if you know you've got, whatever, that you can decide to become a subscriber. And I think it's obviously, you know, theater companies are run by their subscription series and need them to survive.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that they're starting to take my demographic into consideration.
Well, I mean, I think that you know, they've relied on a boomer or older subscription base for a long time, and sort of ignored a younger demographic in some cases.
That might also. Do you mean in terms of programming?
In terms of programming,
yeah.
You know, programming, but yeah, I mean, also, like, when I was in my 20s, there's no way that the cost of a subscription was even in my budget.
No, the cost of a single ticket.
Yes,
you know, like,
exactly.
I remember I started working in the theater when I was in high school. I did the Paprika, one of the first iterations of the Paprika Festival, and I think it was at the Tarragon, and there was some kind of arrangement where we could just go see the shows for free. And, you know, I saw Rune Arledge twice. That's Michael Healy play. There was another. There were great shows that I think Girl in the Goldfish Bowl opened that season, and it was just so amazing to see this level of professionalism for free. And then I realized how much it cost to see it when I did not have. When I was a high school student that wasn't involved in that particular program, and it was completely unaffordable. You know, there are great initiatives like Rush and ways to work around the system. But now it definitely feels as though there's more of a concerted effort to get us in there.
That's good. Because, I mean, that is the... I remember, how many years ago was it? Maybe 3 years ago, there was a forum that it was happening during Next Stage, but it got too big. They had meant to put it in the little cafe upstairs at Factory, but so many people were interested that it moved over to
I remember to a Pass Marai.
And it was supposed to be a forum on where is the audience going. Unfortunately, it presented lots of questions but no answers. But it's clear that, like, everybody's been thinking about that for a number of years. Like, how do we bring people in? And that's a serious question. Some places like Storefront seem to be doing. I don't know. I mean, when they had a space, I didn't see their house, but I saw the audience at Tough Jews.
Yeah,
and that was like, I saw it and it was packed, and people were like sardined in there.
Yeah, a miracle. Like, honest, I don't know what it was. It was completely unprecedented, totally unexpected, and just like a real gift. It had the Storefront's marketing team on that one just did stellar work across the board. So they're like the ads, the video and photography ads that John Gundy and the guys from Huaracha came up with were so well produced, and it was mostly a social media push. We had a really good like interview on Metro Morning, which helped. Like, after I did the interview, I was walking to the space we had a high school student matinee, and I was sitting outside waiting for the cast, and I looked at my email, and the first cast member arrived, and I said, "We just sold out the next 5 performances." And she went, why? Like, we were just so completely floored that within the first week of the run, we sold out the rest of our performances. It does not happen.
No, but I think that you were talking about that social media campaign, and I think that first off, I think that we have to rely more and more on social media to get stuff out, but we have to do it well, and I think that we have to it has to look slick, it has to look good. People are so driven by the visual.
Yeah, and it has to be specific to the show that we're doing. Yeah. There's a lot of social media that are actors rehearsing in a rehearsal room in street clothes, or highlighting the cast, which is great. But when you highlight the experience of what you're going to get when you see the show, especially knowing a theater company's proclivities, like Storefront has a reputation for doing very gutsy indie work. So having that reputation combined with the campaign and the specificity of the campaign, I think really sold that experience. But yeah, we were very lucky to get as much outreach as we got, and to have as many audience members as we had.
I think that I imagine that as you saw the first week, and then probably even as the tickets were no longer available, I'm sure people were trying to get tickets, because once a show has that kind of success, people sort of, now I want to see it,
Yeah.
But there was something about that space for that show had the claustrophobia. Obviously, a lot of people who might be listening to this didn't get a chance to see that show.
I know, I'm sorry.
It's not your fault. It was a small space, but it was a speakeasy in
Kensington
Market in 30s. The first act was 30s, second act was...
the first act's 29, 20s, and then it's 34. 33.
But the fact that the space was so small, if you were in the front row, you were basically knee to knee with people in the cast.
And the fight choreography, was very safe, but it had this feeling of, these fights exploding into people's laps.
Yeah. We
had a splatter section for blood, which didn't happen too often, but every now and then we had audience members get...
Was there a warning?
There wasn't a warning, because if the effect was done properly, which most of the time it was, everyone would be safe.
Yes.
But we did have a few instances where audience members did get splattered.
So a little more interactivity than they were anticipating.
A little bit. It's stage blood. It washes out. It was great. But we...
that first... the play starts with a fight, so you kind of know what you're in for.
Yeah.
And... because it starts with that, and nobody knows that it starts with that, when the violence erupts that way, the audience was just so on edge, which is, I think, kind of what you want from there.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's that introduction is meant to really grab you. It then becomes it's a funny scene as well. They've got this dead body on the floor that they're trying to get out and carry up the stairs, and there's a lot of physical comedy in there. So that scene is just sort of... And all of the characters in the play are on stage for that opening scene. So it was really about just, introducing this world of this play, that it's violent, there's humor, it's going to be... There's a lot of yelling. We're at a 10. We start at a 10.
Yes,
and then sort of just allow the emotional components of the play to deepen as it progresses, but to know that that these are the stakes from the moment it begins.
I'm curious, because one of the reasons why it was in such an intimate space is because the Storefront lost its performance space, and having to move into that small space, total gift. I wonder how it would have worked in like the old storefront space.
Yeah, it's funny. We found out that the storefront was closing around New Year's Eve, and about 10 days later we had decided to do this at Kensington Hall. It was really we had to postpone a week, but the plan was to do it as on schedule as possible. And when we none of us on the production team had been inside Kensington Hall before, but I knew that it was there, and I remember bringing Ben, the director, our production manager, the storefront's producing liaison, and our set designer Adam Belanger, all of whom had started work had started plans for the show being in the storefront, and there were three of us standing there with these huge smiles on our faces, like, this is going to be amazing. And then looking at Adam, the set designer, just like with this panic-stricken look. He could see that our minds were already made up and had no. And luckily, he's a brilliant designer and did outstanding work in that space. Yeah. And it really, the design in the storefront would have been really great. And but it's the fact that we had those practical stairs, like two sets of practical stairs that we could use. It was a real. We tried to think of it as a blessing in disguise from minute one. Yeah. Because otherwise it would just be too sad, really.
Well, yeah. I mean, Storefront was. I mean, Unit 102 is open again, but for a while it was like, so indie theaters are dropping like flies. Unit 102 is gone. Storefront's gone.
Within 6 months of one another. Within 6
months of each other. Really hard for the indie theater scene in Toronto.
I know, and Kensington Hall was a really great alternative, especially for this particular play. Yeah. It's not as traditional a black box venue as those other two spaces, but it did provide, and it still does, like an affordable alternative to companies that are looking for somewhere to make their art happen. It makes for the opening of this new theater, the Assembly Theater, really auspicious. Yes. Because even though it does feel as though there's a trend of these arts spaces closing, we do we have a history of this happening, of spaces popping up, of dreaming really big, of making really great things happen, and then being forced to close their doors and finding a home elsewhere. Yeah. And it's that resilience of the community that I think is something that we should try and focus on. Yeah. That and I really, when I heard the news about Unit 102 closed its doors first, and Miss had been programmed already there, and we knew we're just postponing indefinitely. It really, it felt like, okay, we're gonna figure this out. And then when the storefront closed 3 months before Tough Jews was supposed to open, it was very easy to start to go down a dark corridor in my mind and say, okay, maybe this just isn't going to happen. Maybe these pieces. But when both spaces closed, to the credit of Benjamin Blaze and Dave LaFontaine, respectively, it was really just like full steam ahead. What's next? And it's that spirit of the artists that are driving these initiatives that makes it so encouraging and such an exciting time to be working in the community now.
I mean, the impulse to create is still there. So, the impulse that first caused the space to open is still there. So if you could find another space, then you do it. One kind of longs for the that influx of money that birthed like the mid-sized theaters that still have like those same spaces like Tarragon, Pass Rye, and Factory. That the kind of money that allowed those spaces to open could come back and allow some new spaces.
Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be so amazing.
Yeah. I don't really know how to get that money.
Well, that's the trick, and I think.
But if we, I think that if we continue to prove that there is a need for these spaces, it's becoming increasingly more difficult for, recent graduates from theater programs to find a place to practice, to work. Yeah. It's one thing to get a general audition for one of those mid-sized theater companies, but it's something else altogether. Even to have something like Unit 102 does their Operation 24, or Storefront does Sing for Your Supper, which are these events. They're more community building events than anything, but if you're an artist treading water in the city without an opportunity to really practice your craft, it gives you that chance to go in and make connections and just exercise a bit. And that is such an important aspect of a creative's process that these mid-sized theaters don't offer.
Okay, so I feel like originally that was the job of Fringe, right? Fringe was like a place where you could go and like, if you had a half-assed idea, you could like experiment to get it in. But now Fringe is like, it's almost like laughable to think that you can get a show in. You can put a show in there, but the lottery is so huge that it's difficult to actually get the show in.
Well, and I think that there's an attitude which is completely correct, that if you want the work done, you have to do it yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and an artist can choose whether or not to wait to see if they'll get into Fringe or not, or they can do their play as best they can, wherever they can, and not be beholden to the terms of the Fringe Festival, and just find a way to make some mistakes, which is a really good thing to do.
Yeah. So when did you start writing for theater, or what is it that drew you to the theater in the first place?
I feel like I've always been doing it. I did like Parks and Rec drama classes from the time I was young, like 5 probably, and it was just always something I knew I wanted to do. I did used to act, and I went to an arts high school, and I acted quite a bit. And then I went to, I did an undergraduate program, and at the time, I had already begun writing for theater. Really early on in high school, we had to perform monologues or scenes that we had written, and a teacher of mine encouraged me to continue writing, which led me to the Paprika Festival.
Okay.
So when I was 17, I did my first play there, and so by the time I had gotten to my undergraduate degree, which was in theater, I didn't really. I was pretty snobby and selective about what it was I wanted to work on, because acting made me pretty anxious, and just. It's like a lot of boring work. for if you're in a I don't think there could be anything worse than being cast in a play where you don't really like it.
Yes.
I just found like rehearsal to be a bit tedious, and I could see my interest in being on the stage waning. So I started looking at graduate programs in playwriting specifically, and I got into one, and I went there, and then it was just all writing all the time.
Which program did you get into?
It was the Actors Studio Drama School.
Okay.
Which is in New York City, which is like that TV show that James Lipton hosts.
Yes.
It was one of my classes. And
the Actors Workshop, like
inside the Actors Studio.
That's a class?
It's a class.
Okay. I actually thought it was just a thing they did once in a while for for PBS? Or
It's
whatever?
considered a class.
Okay.
Apparently, you're graded on attendance, but slowly, as you progress, students found that they could pick and choose which ones they wanted to attend without circumstance, so without consequence.
Right.
Yeah. So saw a few good ones of those, and I started producing at the same time, writing. Really, the focus of the program was on creating as much material as possible. Okay. So, taking some of those one-act plays and doing them in the Fringe Festival in New York or in other festivals in New York, and as well as elsewhere. It was a bit difficult to get them done in Canada, being removed. But I've just continued with it since.
When you were trying to produce, was that within the Actors Studio, or was that outside of school?
Mostly outside of school. We had, as a playwright in a program, in this MFA program, there were elements of production that were necessary. There was one class, the Playwright Directors Unit, where it teaches playwrights and directors how to work on new material together with actors.
Sorry, wait. We have to back up to where, first off, there's like a school that teaches you about production. Second of all, that teaches directors and playwrights how to work with each other and with actors.
Yes. The focus of this program is always on the actor themselves and the philosophy of the Actors Studio. So, playwrights and directors in their first 2 years of the program train alongside the actors. What that does is it creates a common vocabulary.
Right.
And it makes I can really only speak as a playwright, that it informed, and not as a director, that it informed my work, knowing what an actor going through this type of training wants to work on. How an actor who's working on like an emotional improv will construct their scene. And the construction of that scene work carried over into structural playwriting tricks. And so it was very beneficial to me. And then the playwrights work on their thesis project throughout their entire time at school. In the second year, they bring in a director and actors, and you work on it for a while. And as the script changes, so does the rehearsal process. You learn how to be informed by a rehearsal process, and how to deal with one another, and how to deal with large personalities, and how to make sure everyone's voices are heard and everyone's ideas are given the attention that they deserve.
What was your thesis project?
My thesis project was a play called Starfishes.
Okay.
It's published in an anthology of short plays, so it gets mostly college productions, sort of regularly, not as much in these past couple of years. But it's a Canadian play set in a lighthouse in the Maritimes in the late 1980s. And it is about a lighthouse keeper and a prostitute who happens to show up at his lighthouse as the fog's coming in and refuses to leave. And the two of them share a kind of lovely little moment together where they grow and learn about their own loneliness and stuff like that.
Do you find that it's done more in Canada or in the U.S.?
It has had one Canadian production in Victoria, I think, but it's published in Best American Short Play, which confuses me a little bit. I'm not sure that they don't they know that Nova
Canada's
Scotia
not
isn't in America. But it's mostly done in places you would not expect. But yeah, it's always very lovely to hear that that young students somewhere, like in Corpus Christi, Texas, are making out in front of an audience because of a play that I wrote.
That's got to be kind of cool to like hear that, like, people that probably they may not have heard of you before now, but all of a sudden they're doing these words that you wrote and they're performing the show that you wrote. That's got to be pretty cool.
It's a real head trip. It's really gratifying, especially with this piece where so much love from the director to the actors that worked on it for 2 years, to the original design team that really informed it, to all of the teachers and all of the students in workshops that put their goodwill towards that piece. It's nice to know that goodwill has pushed this play out there into the world, and that other people are on the receiving end of it and making it part of their story.
Yeah.
Even if it's just for like a little scene study class,
but
or
even then,
whatever that is, in whatever context it is they're working on it, something's drawn them to it, and that is mind-boggling to me.
I think one of the things that's kind of cool is I remember all the plays I did, like especially in high school or even scene studies. I remember them all, and we could talk about them like like I remember them all fondly. So in that way, like this play, when these students are doing it, that's like they're going to talk about this play like 20 years from now.
Yeah, maybe.
They probably are, because we all, even if they don't go into theater, it's going to be the time they did that play, and they're going to see the people. Remember when you did that play, and nobody remember that?
Yeah,
it's kind of cool.
It's cool. Yeah, thanks. I'll take that.
Yeah, you should take that. Tell me about Miss.
Miss is Miss is a tough one. Miss is a heavy one-act play of mine. It is a real drama. It takes place and it's sort of difficult to talk about given its structure. You basically enter into the world of the play with little knowledge of what the main problem is.
Okay.
And as the play progresses, more information comes out through conflict. And so, without giving too much away, Miss is about the aftermath of a fight at a boarding school between two students, which has led to a tragic accident. That accident has affected both of the students that are involved, one of whom is facing expulsion, his English teacher and her fiance. And the three of them so it takes place right before the disciplinary committee at this boarding school meets to decide whether or not this student should be expelled. And this couple has arrived to speak at the disciplinary committee hearing, and the three of them find themselves alone in a classroom right before that happens, and a big emotional showdown ensues.
And this was first performed at the New York Fringe?
It was, yeah. It was produced last year. It was its world premiere. It's a play that I started writing either when I was just finishing up school or had just finished my MFA. And I must have still been in school. I know what apartment I lived in. So I was getting ready. I only had one channel on television, and it was New York 1. And I always watched it while I was getting ready to go to school. And I heard one news report about something that happened to a teacher at a school, and I just sort of froze in the middle of my room and saw the play.
Huh.
You know, it's one of those... It's probably my only moment like that where I went, yes, that's this play. And I started to write it, and it was just too difficult. I think I wrote the first 20 pages, and there was something really, really awkward about the writing process, and having been a student of this particular school's philosophy and knowing that I needed to go to some very raw emotional places to identify with what these characters are experiencing, because each of them are at their own rock bottom, and whatever it was, I knew I wasn't doing a good enough job of emulating that or of going to those places in the moment. So I kind of put it away and always had it in the back of my mind. And it wasn't until... When was it? I was away on a trip, and I got some really bad news, and I felt horrible, and I felt like, everything's meaningless, never gonna write again, stuff like that. And I was having a real pity party for myself. And the immediate, and again, something woke up inside me, and I went, oh, it's that! That's what that character is feeling. And I was coming home on a Greyhound bus, and I spent the bus trip kind of stewing in this beautiful darkness. And I started from scratch, and the play was done, a few, maybe 10 days later.
Only actors or playwrights will have a terrible, shattering experience, and in the back of their heads be like, this I can use.
It's really masochistic, but it's also it let me work through whatever that was really quickly and really efficiently, knowing that this is usable, that this is good and productive. Not that I want to feel that way all the time, and not that there's we need to address these types of feelings pretty vigorously and attentively, but knowing that you can access that without doing yourself emotional harm,
right,
and that it's good for the work. It makes the work it gives it a whole different ease, almost, and it makes dealing with the problem easier because you've put that darkness to good use.
Yeah, I've found that in my writing at times that it helped. Writing a thing helped me to work through something that I was feeling. That I was able to take what I was feeling, put it through, and that actually gave me a bit of a catharsis to be able to deal with what I was feeling. Yeah.
I think with this piece in particular, that was to a degree the case. Mm-hmm. It's not writing as therapy or writing for therapy, but it is just kind of addressing this. I feel really shitty.
Yeah,
and there's anger, and there's all of this justifiable rage that can be put to use somewhere else.
Yeah,
because it's not really doing anything sitting on a Greyhound bus.
Yeah. Oh, the Greyhound bus, if you don't have anything to do, to stew and not have anything to do with it on a Greyhound bus would just be so, you're just trapped in a space that you can't do anything.
Mm-hmm. It was exhausting.
Did you have a notebook, or were you just thinking about everything?
I didn't have a notebook. Maybe I did. I didn't really write anything down. But I had known I mean, I knew the relationship between these three characters. Like, I knew the story. I knew what they were doing. I knew where they were all coming from. Mm-hmm. It was really just a way to like get that emotional hook into what each of them are feeling.
It was that feeling you couldn't get before.
Yeah.
Do you think was it that you hadn't felt that before when you started to write, or was it that you were too young to know it? Or?
It's possible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's quite possible. It was also just a very... it felt like a very like direct correlation to what was happening in that piece. And this was something that I was years removed from and hadn't really given it a second thought. And the fact that it just sprang to my mind. Like, this is what Laura feels. I thought there's got to be something real there.
How did Miss do at the New York Fringe?
Good. Well, it's a very we had a very divisive audience reaction.
Okay.
Last year at the Fringe Festival, they started utilizing this thing called show score, where which I think
something about that. Suddenly, I'm like, I don't know how I feel about
No, I know.
That.
It's like it. I had a few minor panic attacks because so if you attend a Fringe show, you can go rate it online, and then get a 15% discount off of the next Fringe show that you see. And so it aggregated. It's like Yelp reviews for theater, which is fine. I mean, we should be engaging with our audience in a meaningful way, but it also. I don't know that this is the most meaningful way. So I read through every one of those comments, and some of them were like, holy shit, this is jaw-dropping. Like, this is such a mature drama. See it. And then other people were very disturbed by it, and it led to some negative feedback, which is, fine.
Yeah.
I wasn't really there for most of the production.
Okay.
But there is we did a reading of it at Unit 102 when it was in development, and if you go on the journey with the play, it's a very tense hour and 15 minutes, and I think it can be disturbing, it can be cathartic, and I learned from that review aggregator that it's really dependent on the individual and their state of mind. But I do know that it's a real conversation starter of a play.
Yeah.
When we did it at Unit 102, we kind of Dave asked who the audience sympathized with the most, and would point to each actor, and it was like almost an even split. That each of the characters is coming from such a distinct argument, and I think each does their best to justify what they're hunting after, or what they're searching for, or what they want from one another. That I don't think any two people's reactions are going to be the same.
It's interesting because I'm thinking about that show score, and the reason why some people gave it a low score was because they didn't like it, not because it didn't affect them. They were disturbed by it. And it's interesting that theater should have an emotional effect on people. We don't have to like everything. We don't have to enjoy everything. I think we have to be willing to go on the journey, and maybe that's what was lacking for the people who didn't.
Well, and it's, to be fair, it's a really tough sell in a Fringe setting. We ended up, I remember handing out postcards, and the actors started doing this thing where they're like, there are no clowns, there are no drag queens,
Oh.
there's no circus, just come, it's just drama. And you know, I remember going up to an old woman and said, are you looking for a really serious play? And she said, I don't want to see anything serious. And I thought, oh, well then don't come to my play.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but you know, it's really tough to do drama.
That
in a
is
Fringe
difficult
setting.
at Fringe because people are often looking for something. People are looking for something light, or they're looking for something like they want to see something like fantastic.
Yeah,
You know?
And if you take a chance on a show and find yourself stuck in this tense, lights up, lights down, hour and 15-minute long show about disturbing content, then you're probably not going to have a good time. So it was, you know. It was a really great learning experience. It was also it's always invaluable to see the play up on its feet, and watching this play when you get as talented a cast behind it as I had in New York, and as especially the one that's doing it here in Toronto, who are fantastic. It can be like watching acrobats, like watching tightrope walkers,
Right.
And that's the desired effect. Yeah, it's just kind of like tense and breathless and exciting. Hopefully,
I'm sure it is. No, I've never done the New York Fringe. I don't know a whole lot about the New York Fringe, but. You've had a couple of shows at the New York Fringe Festival.
Yep.
If you were to compare it, say, with the Toronto Fringe, which I think is sort of a mid-sized Fringe if you compare it with Edmonton and Winnipeg. So Toronto's mid-sized. Where would you put the New York Fringe in terms of size?
It's about the same size,
Okay.
probably about 200 shows.
Okay.
They are going through some big overhauls. They took a hiatus this past year and have just announced that they'll be coming back in a much smaller festival. The big criticism that New York Fringe gets is like, why do we need a Fringe in New York? It's a city where theater is kind of bursting from the seams.
Do you find do people not support the Fringe because of that idea?
No, I think that their audience, that their attendance is always pretty. It seems as though like it's pretty regular, and the people that love the Fringe love the Fringe.
Okay.
It has a real loyal audience base, but in talking about it, there's a bit of snark. It isn't like in in the Village Voice or anyone that's doing official reviews of the Fringe often will do like a weekend at the New York Fringe and we'll take in 5 shows and sort of talk about how unnecessary all of it was. It's adjudicated and that does lead to kind of difficult questions amongst audiences and artists alike.
So it's not a lottery Fringe?
It's not. It's not part of the CAF circuit,
Okay.
so there is no lottery. But I've been an adjudicator for them, and their system of adjudication is very involved. It's the largest multi-arts festival in North America,
Right.
and so the volume of applications that they receive is so high that they can't possibly have a lottery system. But what they do is they are more inclined to pick conversation starters than they are. So like I was part of an adjudication cluster that was made up of 3 theater people from different demographics, different ages, different genders, and we had to rank the same like 30 to 40 plays, And there was one piece where we all gave it like an 8.5 or a 9. It was the highest scoring one, and we all just said, "Lovely. They're professional. They're going to make a great piece of theater. All sounds good."
Nice.
It didn't get into the festival.
Oh shit!
Whereas the one that I gave a 10 out of 10 to, and another person in my cluster gave a 1 out of 10 to, when we had to justify our choices to the board, we had this big, heated argument, and that play got in. And that's their way of making sure the Fringe stays Fringe.
Okay.
That you're getting a mixed bag. You're not. Sure. It's not just creating a curated festival of 200 lovely, professionally made, good pieces of theater. It's making sure that we will walk away talking about it.
Yeah, I guess in a place like New York, there's a lot of talent, so you could get like 200 nice, well crafted.
Well, and they're for New York, they come from all over the world. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the case, but it would definitely. There were definitely a few where everyone had pretty generally positive feelings about the pieces, and they didn't get it.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that is a way to like replace the fact that the lottery system means that you don't know what you're going to get, and so if you're in like doing the lottery, anybody can get in. So you don't know. Like there have been years where I'm just like I don't even know what any of this is.
Yeah, I know. It's I have never actually gotten in to the lottery. And I applied for many years in a row. It wasn't until a friend of mine, Caitlin Robson, said she was going to apply to the Fringe for the first time and wanted to do a play of mine, and I was like, "Yeah, well, good luck. I mean, if you get in, you could totally do it." But I've been applying since I was in high school, and I never got in. And then, lo and behold, her first try, she got into the festival.
But you never know.
You never know.
I have in my life, I think, in 2 iterations. Once in the '90s with a friend, and then once with Keystone Theatre a couple of years ago. We got into the Fringe through the lottery, but into the Toronto Fringe.
Yeah,
Keystone had done some other Fringes, but it was like those just twice. For the Toronto Fringe. Like, you never know. That lottery system is really based on luck.
Yeah, it certainly is. And great. That's led to such excellent work and experiences that are invaluable for the artist that's putting them on. And then every now and then I've stumbled into a show that I didn't know anything about or had no expectations, and it's stuck out as a really fond theater going memory. I've had other experiences.
We've all had other experiences, and that's the thing is that sometimes the thing is that there's so much, and you end up in this spot and you're like, okay, so that show's sold out. I got some time to see a show. I was going to see a show. I can't see that one. So what's on now? I'll go see that one. And then you end up in either a really wonderful magic situation, or you sit for an hour wondering what you're looking at.
Yeah.
But that's Fringe.
And it's really the only way. Like you can only really get good by doing stuff.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
So and by having that dialogue with an audience, and by realizing that people are either really digging what you're doing or suffering through it. I think that's all very informative and very in the spirit of Fringe.
Speaking of having people learning from having people watch your shows, when you were writing shows for Paprika and things like that, were you conscious of learning from the audience, or were you just thinking about getting the thing done? And at what point did you realize that you were learning from the audience?
Probably, it was probably that early on. My first show at Paprika went really well by all standards, but as well as could be expected. And I was a shitty 16 or 17-year-old. So this really went to my head. And I did another show at the Paprika the following year, and it really wasn't going as well. And I didn't act in it, and I watched it, or I would sit backstage, and I could see that the audience would all shift at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, they'd all move in their seats, or, you know, someone would like look at their watch, and I could start to tell all of those little movements. And I thought, what is so different about this piece than the last one? And so I've tried to be aware of that throughout, but and I've had the benefit of being in a specialized program where my work was subjected to workshops and things where the public was a major part of the play's development. Tough Jews was in development for years and years, and all of those things were aspects to take into consideration. But without that, it can be quite difficult, and you really don't know until you get it in front of an audience, because things can be going great in rehearsal.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone's in on the joke. We all like that joke gets a laugh every time, and then you get into an audience that's like, if it's snowing outside and the house is a little light and it's getting dark early and no one wants to be there, and all of a sudden that joke isn't as funny as anyone thought that it was in rehearsal. And
always, anytime I'm like presenting something new, you know, we're having a great time in the rehearsal, but that first performance, I'm just like, I'm waiting. Like I know where the first laugh should be, and if it's not there, what do we do?
I know.
What do we do? And it's interesting because an audience, you know, having done a few workshops are kind of different from like regular performance, because a workshop audience comes sort of prepared to think and tell you about the show, but they'll tell you different things than a regular audience.
Yes.
Because a regular audience will not say the words, "I didn't like the show," for the most part. As an usher at the Edinburgh Theatre, I learned that people never don't like the show unless they have, like, regular people don't not like the show. They say things like, "It was so well done," or "Everybody did such a great job." They say,
how did they learn all those lines?
Exactly. But the audience tells you things in the way that they watch the show and they move, and like all those things that you described with the audience, people looking at their watch and shifting at the same time. I've watched audience members suddenly become fascinated with like the lighting fixtures.
Oh yeah.
Things like all the things that they do, those are telling you things, because the regular audience just won't say the words, "I didn't like it, and here's what I didn't like."
Yeah, and how Canadian of us.
It's true. It's true.
Wouldn't it be great in a respectful way, of course, to be able to say, you know, I didn't really care for this production. I think that there wasn't a lot of tension in this scene, or this failed to hold my attention, or, you know, there are ways to give informed feedback about what you didn't like. I think people don't feel
like they can. I think that the average audience member feels like I paid a certain price, I went to see the show, I was supposed to like it.
Yeah.
So therefore, I must have liked it. And they will lie to themselves with those things,
especially if they're paying through the nose to see these expensive, big budget things.
The thing about it was so well done. That's not a thing they're saying to the staff, to the ushers. They're saying that to their friends as they're leaving. Like, they're convincing themselves that they enjoyed the show because they feel like they have to. Like you're saying, because they paid so much.
Yeah.
Because, you know, they're, again, for whatever reason, they're supposed to. It's a weird thing that we do.
I know.
How do we teach people that they're allowed to not like stuff?
I don't. Well, you just have to do more of it, right? Like the more variety that, like, if you're subscribing, if you have a Mervish subscription, if you are an old person that has a Mervish subscription, then this is what you're doing with your with this is the only stuff you see. You only see Aladdin,
right?
And Come From Away and other big shows. You don't have any basis of comparison. And you think that's what theater is. I had someone see the first play that I did in the New York Fringe, and they came up to me afterwards and said they'd never sat so close to the actors before. This was in like a 150-seat black box theater, which is like large. You know, it was in La Mama. It was it was a good sized house, and I looked at them like they were from Mars because most of my education has been in theaters much smaller than this one. So if you have variety, it's like. You know, different tastes in foods. If you go to, if you know different cuisines from different parts of the world, you're more than likely to say, no, I don't really like Greek food, but we can go for Thai. Like, and there's a way to, you know, you have a basis of comparison. Whereas if you're only going to Dirty Dancing the musical, or things like it, you may not know that it's okay to leave at intermission if you aren't enjoying it yourself. And stuff like that.
I've seen audiences that thin out at the intermission. You know that things aren't going so well at that point.
Well, I think Brecht would say that things are going just fine if they're leaving at intermission.
Well, it depends on why.
It depends on why,
Yes. If they're leaving because they're
it's Flashdance the musical,
then you know if they're leaving because they're bored, things aren't going so well. So Miss is opening like on the 14th.
The 14th,
and at the new Assembly Theatre.
The new Assembly Theatre. Well, the Assembly.
The Assembly Theatre.
It is new.
It's new. I got the.
It's in Parkdale. It's on Queen Street. It's got 2 bathrooms.
2 bathrooms! Crazy.
And it's a really great new space.
That's actually, you know, as far as most indie spaces go, that's actually pretty high-end.
I know.
Bathrooms.
See, this is a very auspicious opening.
It is a very auspicious opening.
It's a sign of good things to come.
Where can we find you online?
I have a website, michaelrossalbert.com. Cool. And I do Twitter and stuff.
Nice.
So you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Michael.
Thank you.